Welcome to the Church of the Holy Spirit Songs video on homosexuality in the Bible. My name is Dr. Mike Smith. The purpose of the video is so that every Christian may be bold and unburdened in their walk with Christ. Now today we're going to talk about the Old Testament Clobber passages, specifically Genesis 19 and Leviticus 18:22. So let's get started. Now with Genesis 19, the story of Sodom, we're going to review that briefly. But I want to cover with you the importance of hospitality and the sin of inhospitality. Now, here's how the story goes. Lot offers shelter to two strangers who happen to be angels. That was revealed to us in Genesis 18. Now, once Lot brings them in, it turns out the men of Sodom demanded that Lot's visitors be handed over to them so they could know them. But here's the key question. Why did Lot offer shelter to strangers? The answer? Hospitality. Now this is important for us to understand because in ancient biblical times, hospitality was really the difference between life and death. Travel was extremely hard during this time. Israel was hot and dry. And when hospitality was offered, it provided food, shelter, and safety. It established friendship and vows, expressed kindness and compassion. It was kind of like their way of networking. You see, Lot may have to go out and travel pretty soon, and he would want that same hospitality offered to him. Remember, it was about life and death. Here are some pictures. To the left is the dry, hot climate of Israel. That's a pretty tough terrain. In order to protect themselves, they often traveled in camel trains. Now, Exodus 23:9 is God's command to us that we be hospitable to people. Now, granted, Exodus was written way after the events of Genesis. However, it was well established in the minds of Abraham and Lot, this idea about taking care of a foreigner. So really, the sin of Sodom is not same-sex committed relationships. Instead, the sin is inhospitality. Now, do we have support for that? We do. They're called summary passages. We have Ezekiel and Matthew. Let's look at Ezekiel. Ezekiel 16 verse 49 says, "This was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and the needy." Now, Bible scholars will tell you the best interpretation of the Bible is the Bible itself. And right here, Ezekiel is telling us what that sin was. Now, let's move on to Leviticus 18:22. "Do not lie with a man as one lies with a woman. That is detestable." Now, for us to understand this, we have to put Leviticus into context, historical context. Leviticus is part of the Holiness Code, or what some people call the Torah, or the Mosaic Law. It's basically over 600 rules and regulations that covered every aspect of life: dietary, medicinal, culture, farming, relationships. It covered everything. It was for a specific people, at a specific time, in a specific place. The specific people were the people of Israel. The specific time was before they were entering into the promised land. God gave Moses to teach his people these rules and regulations for perfect living, handed down right from God. And it was for when they were in the promised land, to separate them out from the pagan cultures. And that's exactly what the purposes are. One, the negative purpose was to point to sin, showing that we need a Messiah. But also there was a positive purpose, and that was to protect Israel. As they entered into that promised land, God, with these rules and regulations, were separating them out, protecting them from the cultures around them. So let's go back to Leviticus 18:22. "Do not lie with a man as one lies with a woman. That is detestable." And a key question is what is the theme of Leviticus? Now remember, Leviticus is part of the Holiness Code. Specific people, a specific time, and a specific place. Now if we look at the first 3 verses of Leviticus, we're told what the theme of the entire chapter is. Look at the boldface part. "You shall not do what is done in the land of Egypt where you lived, nor are you to do what is done in the land of Canaan where I am bringing you." See, God was preparing his people to enter into a new area, and he was protecting them. That's the theme of Leviticus 18. Let's look at 18:22 again specifically, and what I want to ask is this. What is the Hebrew word for detestable? Now, the Hebrew word for this is toiba, and what it means is ritually unclean. It relates to idolatry. Now, in the King James Version of the Bible, they interpreted toiba as an abomination. The NIV, for instance, interprets it as detestable. And so here's the summary. What is detestable is a man lying with another man in worship of pagan fertility gods. That goes along with the theme of Leviticus. This is one of my favorite slides. And what you see here is the time that the law was handed down. Again, remember, specific people, time, and place. It has a historical context. It was about righteousness required through this law. It was God's perfect standard of living that, of course, we can't do. So what does God do? He fulfills it for us through the life of Jesus Christ, through his Messiah, his anointed one. Jesus comes and lives a perfect, sinless life, fulfilling the letter and the spirit of the law perfectly. Once he did that, it brings us into a new era that we live in today, the dispensation of grace, where righteousness is not required. It's been fulfilled. Instead, righteousness is given through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Romans 6:14 says it great. For sin shall no longer be your master, because you are not under the law but under grace. Acts 13:39 is another great summary of it all. Everyone who believes in him is declared right with God, something the law of Moses, that law, that specific people, time, and place, that historical context, that law could never do what Jesus Christ fulfilled for us. We are now in the dispensation of grace. Summary, the law was for the consecration of God's chosen people. The sin of Sodom was about inhospitality, and Leviticus 18:22 was all about idolatry. My name is Dr. Mike Smith. Thank you for watching.